Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. It's Ferrari put the final touches on Hamilton's move to the Scuderia. His former team Mercedes are discussing their car upcoming for 2025, the W16. Reports have it they will be making an evolution of last year's car rather than a revolution. That Ferrari are favouring. That does not mean, though, in Mercedes' opinion, they are any less the favourites to do a serious number the upcoming year. They believe that given what's happened in Las Vegas, Spa and even Silverstone last season, they believe if they fix the fundamental problems with their car, which they are working on significantly as we'll discuss over the coming minutes, they could still be a serious contender next year. Is this the correct approach? Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. Starting with this, we got today some further confirmation ready from Ferrari as to everything happening. The helmets, the race suits, and that type of stuff. So today, Ferrari dropped this video. This was a bit of a teaser, I think, that Duquesa put out there and Ferrari put out there as well. But yeah, this was the video that Ferrari came up with today, with Hamilton and Leclerc in the Ferrari race suits with all the new sponsors and that stuff for the first time. I think it's probably better than last year's one. Obviously, it has the HP logos splattered everywhere. I don't really know why they need their logo on it like 3 times, but whatever. They did pay, I don't know, $50, $100 million, whatever it was anyway, the number associated with that, partnership. It's Hamilton, it's Leclerc, arguably the strongest lineup put together in F1 history, certainly in the recent past, and this is kind of the full look at the race suit and the helmets that the guys are going to be rocking with for next year. Hamilton's one, of course, we saw the other day. It's got the 7 stars on the sides, presumably for the 7 World Championships. It's got Hamilton's logo, the 44, back to a very nice shade of yellow, and then, of course, Leclerc's new helmet on the right-hand side as well. Leclerc had some funny images, actually, to go with this, such as this one. I think you can tell by his eyes here that he's kind of cheesing, isn't he? Because he's like, why have you got me sitting like this? But, yeah, he's chilling with the helmet on, getting ready to go for the new year, and just, to get a good look at everything, the boots, the, the trouser part of the race suit, whatever. I know people care about this type of stuff. I don't massively care. It's red, it's Ferrari, like, it is what it is. But I know that people generally like the pictures. This was, just a couple of clips ready from Hamilton. Still feels a bit surreal, Hamilton being in red. I know we're kind of getting used to it at this point, but it is still quite remarkable. And this was Leclerc's tweet, actually, with all the images that we just mentioned over the last couple of minutes, including this one, as we just saw, and also this one as well from the back of the helmet, if you guys are interested to keep your eyes on that. Some more shots of Hamilton in Ferrari red as well I wanted to go through here. He's obviously got another Richard Mille on. I imagine it's probably only a matter of time until there's some sort of Richard Mille Hamilton edition watch. We saw him do that with IWC, I think, on a couple of occasions. But yeah, Hamilton the Ferrari red with the Italian flag on it just still does feel kind of surreal. So multiple shots, again, lots of things happening. I know that Jeremy Clarkson has been saying a few things like, oh, Hamilton, he's going to have a hard time with Leclerc because Leclerc spends less time posing for pictures than Hamilton does and all this. And it's like, okay, whatever. Like, at the end of the day, the talking is going to be done on the track. The new hat as well, the 44, the Ferrari logo, it's all rather nice. It is Ferrari at the end of the day. Maybe not quite the same energy from this image. I thought it pretty funny just by comparison, really, looking at the image of the 2 Ferrari guys together for the upcoming season and then comparing it to the 2 Williams guys. But nonetheless, still on paper, a pretty strong partnership. Also, I imagine the first ever F1 driver pairing to have 0 appendices between the 2 drivers, with Albon, of course, and Sainz as well. So I thought that was kind of nice to see everyone, getting nice and friendly. This as well is kind of critical. This is Franco Colapinto in his new Alpine race suit, and I imagine we shall be seeing some more of this. There is a feeling, and most Formula 1 fans would agree, based on the way that Alpine are dealing with Colapinto and dealing with Jack Doohan right now, I think we are expecting Colapinto to get that drive at some point. The rumour is Doohan has a drive for the first 6 rounds. After that, if he very much impresses, he will keep the drive, maybe. If he doesn't impress as much as Briatore wants him to, Colapinto's going to get the drive, especially because Colapinto has signed something like a 5-year deal. It might not be a 5-year, but it's at least a 3-year deal. Like, Colapinto is on a big contract with Alpine. They're not doing that for him just to sit on the bench. They clearly think he's a valuable asset. He will be in the car, I believe. Anyway, but let's talk about the situation at Mercedes, because Ferrari has been all the talk over the last couple of weeks. There was discussion, understandably, towards the end of last season as to whether Hamilton would regret his decision. Certainly, mid-year, what happened around Silverstone and Spa and those Grand Prix would have made Hamilton probably think twice. I know that, Lewis, I'm sure, was pretty convinced joining Ferrari was the right thing to do. It just made sense for him at that point in his career. But there was some understanding mid-season, once the Red Bull dominance wore off and McLaren weren't at their A-game all of the time, neither were their drivers, that there was opportunities there for Mercedes, and they seemed to be making substantial progress. They did, however, still finish 4th in the Constructors' Championship, which is their lowest positioning, really, since 2012 or something, I think, when they came 5th. So they were still in no man's land, but on certain weekends, the Mercedes W15 was still a very quick car and a race-winning car, as it did on multiple occasions. Russell in Austria, kind of fortuitous, and Las Vegas, and then of course Hamilton's victories in Silverstone and Spa. Of course, it was also a 1-2 in Spa, but Russell got disqualified after the one-stop related floor damage drama. And at the end of last season, I think there would have been no doubt in Hamilton's minds this move was the correct one. Mercedes was still largely in no man's land in terms of pace. Some weekends they'd really switch it on, some weekends they wouldn't, and Ferrari nearly won the Constructors' Championship and maybe even could have been in the mix for the drivers as well, had the middle of the season for Leclerc gone slightly differently. So I think Hamilton will have no regrets about this decision, but Mercedes will try and ensure that he does have some regrets and build the best car they have done with the W16. So Mercedes, it would be quite the jump for them to get from 4th in the Constructors back to winning it or having a championship-capable car, but we are at the point now where we are expecting the delta between the top cars to be as minimal as possible. It's the final year of the regulations. There shouldn't be any massive advantage to one particular car over another, and look, they've got Russell in the car, who by his own admission believes that if he was in a championship fight with Verstappen in a similar car, he would be able to beat him, and they've got Kimi Antonelli, who is meant to be the next real prodigy of Formula 1. So Mercedes technically have the pieces there. Whether they can actually build a car in the ground effect era that works at every single circuit pretty well at the bare minimum, that is still the question mark. So they will unveil the car on the 24th of February, and then they will do a shakedown the next day in Bahrain before pre-season testing starts. So it's interesting why they're doing this. We know that usually they at least have some sort of reveal earlier. They'll do some sort of shakedown at Silverstone, but because all the teams are getting launched at the F175 event in London on, I think it's the 18th of February, then Mercedes are deciding to do their own car launch a bit later. For example, Ferrari are doing their actual car launch on the 19th of February. Mercedes are going to leave it a few days after that, it seems. Whether that's because they've got something special up their sleeve, maybe, maybe not. But the W16 is an evolution of last year's car. We know that Ferrari are changing 99% of their parts. McLaren and Red Bull will also be making seemingly quite radical adjustments to their final year, because I think there's a general feeling that if they just evolve last year's car, it might not be good enough to challenge for the final year when every team has still new ideas. But Mercedes are pretty confident that their car was good, just not good enough on many occasions. The rear axle was especially weak. Hamilton never liked that through the entirety of the ground effect era with these Mercedes, and even last year after he told them to fix it, they didn't really fix it especially well. So the rear axle will see changes. There will also be other innovations and improvements to the concept. But Mercedes are looking at races like Las Vegas, where they won emphatically and Hamilton went for 10th to 2nd with relative ease during the Grand Prix. To be fair, that weekend was kind of a fever dream because somehow Mercedes tyres just didn't degrade, whereas everyone else's did. But they still had unreal pace, and even in qualifying as well, where tyre deg wasn't an issue, they were still the fastest cars out there. So in certain conditions, in those cooler conditions, the Mercedes could be really quick. It was quick at Silverstone, it was rapid at Spa as well, and Mercedes are looking at those weekends and saying, look, on certain weekends we genuinely had the most pace of anyone on the entire grid, sometimes by quite some margin. If they can replicate that every weekend, they can have a championship winning car, absolutely. So that's what Mercedes are thinking of doing, and well, this is what they're talking about. At the end of last year, they brought some upgrades to the car. They couldn't afford to do everything they wanted to do. So Tota says at the end of the year, we had to give up some aerodynamic and mechanical updates because we simply didn't have the money to produce it because of the accidents that happened at the end of last year, such as in, the car became tricky, didn't it? Especially at Austin at a couple of moments that were not exactly ideal. So they believed there was much more progress to come from the car, but they couldn't bring everything they wanted to the table. There's also talk about the floor, about how last year's W15 floor was not developed enough as they needed it to be. One of the main headaches caused by the bottom of the car, the floor of the car. The floor of the W15 was not able to guarantee a good interaction between the flows coming out of the diffuser at the back of the car and those that cut through the beam wing and the rear wing, also at the back of the car. Several times during the races, the engineers made micro corrections to the aerodynamics, moves that were difficult to interpret, making the drivers unable to extract the maximum from the single seater. That's pretty interesting, right? Because we saw this multiple times. Russell was maybe the only driver on the grid that was talking about this. And I'm not saying that it was entirely Russell just, thinking things in his head. But you guys will remember multiple times, and Hamilton was also in this position as well. The car would look good on one lap. They might go into the pits, come out on a new set of, soft tyres, and all of a sudden the car is nowhere. And it happened to Red Bull as well sometimes, and it seemed to be very specific things in terms of track condition, that sometimes the Mercedes would be rapid and sometimes it was nowhere. Russell often said the tyres are just confusing. You put one set of soft tyres on, they're literally different to the previous set. But is it also possible that Mercedes were making very, very micro adjustments to the car, the floor, or whatever, and it was affecting the car significantly because of, the intricacies of the airflow here in Formula 1. So it seems like the car was just not able to get anywhere near any types of consistency. And I think maybe that came from the floor. Certainly the floor's interaction with the rear axle, where they were having many of their problems. So Mercedes reckon if we fix the floor and make it better, we'll be in a better spot because these micro adjustments either won't be necessary, or if we make them, the car will still work, whereas it really didn't on many occasions last year. Interesting as well that Mercedes reveal will not be like an in-person reveal or anything. It makes sense, to be fair, because they're going to do that kind of thing at the F175 event in London. So they're just going to do digital only images of the car. Presumably the car that they show at the launch event is going to be like last year's car with a new livery on, and then they're going to show the actual car maybe on the 24th, and then the next day they're going to do its shakedown so we get to see it in person type thing. But yeah, that's the plan, and understandably they have changed their mind on the timings based on the way that Formula 1 is doing things this year. But of course, to make the floor better, there's also some critical elements in terms of, okay, can they actually do the simulation work compared to reality that they want to do? There was talk recently that, Ferrari simulator and kind of wind tunnel and stuff like that is just more advanced than Mercedes is right now. And obviously Red Bull are struggling with that too. They want the new one. They've no longer got Newey. That's a problem. But Mercedes apparently over the winter has paid particular attention to the correlation between the data collected in the wind tunnel and analyses carried out in the CFD factory, computational fluid dynamics or whatever. I think that's what it stands for. The goal was to obtain a versatile car capable of adapting quickly to circuits with different characteristics through a more careful approach to the design phase of the single-seater. So that's what Mercedes are trying to do, and this seems to be a very sensible approach, because other teams, let's say Ferrari, McLaren, they were pretty good everywhere. Like, they had their weaknesses at certain tracks, and of course the mid-season upgrade for Ferrari didn't work before they found a way to resolve that situation, whereas Mercedes was either very good or really nowhere at all. And, obviously you're not going to win a championship in that fashion, but you can win races. So Mercedes are going for a more versatile approach, and to be fair, if it works, and they can be very competitive almost every weekend, they could be in the mix. But, the reality is it's not exactly expected. It's just Mercedes have reason to be optimistic about the way that they are progressing with their car based on what they saw last year and the way that they think they can improve it. And also, they've got extra testing time now. Being fourth place in the constructors, they get additional time, which is potentially pretty valuable compared to a team like McLaren that won the constructors. They get significantly more hours, Mercedes, to develop the car. So there's still a month to go pretty much. They're going to test some more things, but I'm sure now they have fundamentally the ideas they want to run with. And there was also talk about this, that Adrian Newey was actually a big fan of the car. Maybe not a fan of it, but he found it interesting, right? Certainly the ideas that they'd come up with on the W15. We know that Newey actually seemed to copy the W14s. shoulders as it seemed to be for the RB20 last year. But it seems like, yes, the W16 will be a close cousin of the W15, but there will be many changes, especially on the rear axle, and they've made changes for the W16. So they are taking Mercedes a more conservative approach, it seems, than any other top team. But maybe it's the right approach, right? Like, the other teams seem to be being more aggressive. Maybe that's going to backfire. Are McLaren, having had a very good mechanical concept, are they going to chase more downforce? Because that's usually how Formula 1 has been for basically the history of the sport. Once they actually figured out what downforce was, basically, and started putting wings on the cars, that more downforce is better. And it is generally, apart from in ground effect, when what's really important is maintaining a solid mechanical platform, because Adrian Newey was very clear from day one of these regulations in 22 to say, look guys, it's not about maximum downforce because the car's going to porpoise all over the place, and guess what happened to the majority of teams that season, and the reason why Red Bull have won a championship at the bare minimum over all of the last 3 seasons. So this is why Newey is very valuable to a new team such as Aston Martin, where he is going shortly, but equally the other teams have surely figured this out by now. But Mercedes, even last year, they had decent downforce at times, but they did not have the mechanical platform still. So if they fix the mechanical platform, maybe they can catch a stride on the other teams. But there's no guarantee they'll do that because they've had 3 years for a working mechanical platform and they've not really achieved it in either of those 3 years. Their best bet, really, was the W13, the zero-pod car, which was, compared to the Red Bull, terrible, but had its advantages and even won a race that season. Just to close out the video with the race fans driver rankings, they are back for the final because they don't do them on the weekends. They do them in the regular week, of course, and Ocon was 11th, if you guys kind of forgot that one. 10th place actually goes to Lewis Hamilton here. I think you can argue a couple of different ways on this because Hamilton had his moments, right? I mean, Silverstone, as I say, won in Spa and the drive back in Las Vegas, but it was relatively few and far between. As I say, both Mercedes drivers were struggling with various elements of the W15. Hamilton's qualifying pace wasn't particularly good last season, so I think you can argue a few different ways on where Hamilton should be. I think he's quite hard to place, really, as a driver last season. This feels somewhat harsh, but I can understand some of the logic given, you know, the results with respect to Russell and stuff like that. But still, in terms of race pace and other factors, I think you could argue Hamilton was better than this. 9th place has gone to Nico Hülkenberg as well. So I guess that's a question for you guys, really, because I think Hamilton was clearly better than Ocon in terms of 10th versus 11th. Was Hamilton better than Hülkenberg? You know, I think you can debate it. Hülkenberg had a good season, at times a very excellent season. Of course, Hülkenberg never had an opportunity to win a race, which Hamilton did twice, so there's always that plays in the favour of any driver who is in a car capable of winning races. Hülkenberg was not. He had some stunning qualifying sessions throughout the year, but towards the end, Magnussen actually had his number on many an occasion, and there are still, you know, questions on Hülkenberg's tyre management and consistency in terms of race pace and stuff like this, but yeah, he's going to be at Sauber next year. We'll see how he gets on over there, but very much interested in your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.